The United Nations Security Council is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the deadly protests in Iran at the request of the United States. Donald Trump has refused to rule out military action on Iran over the killing of protesters. At least 2,600 people have been killed in the unrest. Let's listen in now to the U.S. representative to the UN Security Council, Mike Waltz.
Colleagues, let me be clear. The level of violence, the level of repression that the Iranian regime has unleashed on its own citizens, its own people, has repercussions for international peace and security. You're going to hear today that it doesn't, that it's an internal matter. Absolutely wrong and false. This demands this council's attention. The people of Iran are demanding their freedom like never before in the Islamic Republic's brutal history. Unarmed, peaceful people who love their country are taking to the streets in pursuit of their legitimate aspirations for a better future. Well, this is our message. President Donald J. Trump and the United States of America stands by the brave people of Iran, period. And regardless of its excuses, and you will hear many today from the Iranian regime and from its friends, the regime is solely responsible for the economic misery of the Iranian people and the repression of their freedom, and they will be held accountable. The estimates of the numbers of protesters killed by the regime so far range from the thousands to the tens of thousands. Although visibility into the totality of the violence has been obscured deliberately by the regime's nationwide internet blackout. Why has the internet been shut down for weeks? Why have the phone lines been cut? Why are commercial satellite communications being jammed in a very sophisticated manner? We've had a complete blackout. No internet, no phones, nothing. Only thanks to the Starlink system do we even have some window, a limited window, into the atrocities that are ongoing. Well, President Trump has been clear. He will not, nor should the international community, tolerate innocents being slaughtered in the streets. Since 1979, for decades, the regime has posed a threat to peace and security in the name of a religious ideology. The regime calls for death to America and the annihilation of Israel. Even as its own citizens cannot afford the very basics, food, drinking water, very basic medicines, it spends billions to develop its nuclear and ballistic missile programs to threaten its neighbors in the world and its support of terrorism. Well, from its inception, the regime has been the world's '1 state sponsor of terrorism, so declared year after year, bringing uncountable, death and suffering to innocents from Beirut all the way to Buenos Aires, while its rulers have become rich off of oppression and misery meted upon the Iranian people. The Iranian regime has also been a serial human rights abuser from its very first day in power. And as you heard today, young women like Mahsa Amini have been murdered for daring to uncover their hair in public. While religious minorities have been subjected to the most severe persecution, these abuses have been documented right here by this body, have been documented at length by the United Nations, have been documented by the Secretary General's own regular reports on the situation of human rights in Iran, the most recent of which was released just last year in 2025. Colleagues, in addition to the gross human rights abuses, in addition to its illegal march towards a nuclear weapon, in 1979, the regime we now know, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, gave support to radical students who attacked the United States Embassy in Tehran, took over 50 Americans hostage, and held them in captivity for over 400 days. That was followed by the bombing attack on the United States Embassy in Beirut, killing 17 Americans and scores of Lebanese civilians, followed by the supported and direction of terrorists who drove 2 trucks filled with explosives into U.S. and French barracks in Beirut, killing 241 American soldiers and 58 French military personnel, all part of a multinational force invited by the Lebanese government. It's responsible for the deaths of over 600 American service members and countless others in Iraq. Bottom line is Iran's partners and proxies with Iranian weaponry, documented by the United Nations Yemen panel of experts, have repeatedly attacked our partners in the Gulf and attempted to damage global energy infrastructure. And then finally, the Iranian regime state television amplifies calls for a, quote, one-bomb solution to wipe Israel off the map, which ironically would be not only a massacre of all Israelis, but also the Palestinian people whom the regime claims to support. In 2011, the regime attempted to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C., but luckily the attempt was thwarted, and further, the regime has continued to plot assassination attempts against the President of the United States, against President Trump, and other senior U.S. government officials, in addition to those who dare speak out living here in the United States. Colleagues, Iran has destabilized the Middle East for decades. It has supported and enabled Hamas's brutality, its hostage-taking, its heinous October 7th attacks. It has funded Hezbollah. It has funded the Houthis. Iranian-aligned militia groups in Iraq, including Kataib Hezbollah, have attacked the United States and the region again and again. It's backed the brutal Assad regime, and at every turn, the regime has put terrorist proxies in other nations before the welfare of its own citizens. And as a result of the regime's actions, putting money in the pockets of terrorists, funding its nuclear and missile programs instead of the basic needs for the people of Iran, Iranians have had enough. The regime's dereliction of duty to its own citizens is what has put the Ayatollahs in the positions they are in today, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, protesting in the streets after decades of neglect and abuse. So everyone should ask themselves, everyone sitting here today, how many people are dead? How many people are wounded, maimed, and abused in the Middle East, in Israel, in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, even Venezuela, because of the regime's support for terrorism as the largest state sponsor? And I would like to address the allegation put forward by the regime that these inspired protests are somehow a foreign plot to give a precursor to military action. Everyone in the world needs to know that the regime is weaker than ever before, and therefore is putting forward this lie because of the power of the Iranian people in the streets. They are afraid. They're afraid of their own people. Iran says it's ready for dialogue, but its actions say otherwise. This is a regime that rules through oppression, through violence, and through intimidation, and has destabilized the Middle East for decades. Well, enough is enough. We all have a responsibility to support the Iranian people and to put an end to the regime's neglect and oppression of the Iranian nation. Colleagues, let me be clear. President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter. And no one should know that better than the leadership of the Iranian regime. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement.
All right, we were just listening to the U.S. representative to the UN Security Council, Mike Waltz, as he was addressing that emergency meeting that the U.S. requested. Some of the stuff that he said was that the U.S. stands by the brave people of Iran. He said that the level of violence, repression in Iran has repercussions for international peace and security. He also said that Iran has destabilized the Middle East for decades. Let's go back now to Gabriel Elizondo, who's live for us at United Nations headquarters in New York. So, Gabe, what else did we hear from Mike Waltz?
Yeah, listening closely if he would reveal anything more than what the White House has, and not a lot there, but I would say that, he did at the end there sort of leave the door open, very much so, for potential U.S. military action, saying that the Iran says that they're ready for dialogue, but their actions say otherwise. The Iranian people are saying enough is enough. So also saying what he says before is that Donald Trump is a man of action, not the UN, which is an organization of talk, essentially, were the words of Mike Waltz, the U.S. envoy there. I think you saw him basically lay out the case of why the United States has had these worries or grievances against the Iranian government for so many years, saying that they're basically a threat to international peace and security, a line that goes directly to the Security Council because the role of the Security Council is, in theory, to maintain international peace and security. And he also sort of foreshadowed what we could be hearing from other council members such as Russia or China, who might say what is happening in Iran is an internal affair, an internal issue that needs to be dealt with internally within Iran. Mike Waltz saying that's not the case. What's happening in Iran clearly has repercussions for international peace and security. So those were, I think, the major themes that we heard from the U.S. envoy.
Yeah, Gabe, we heard also the U.S. envoy say that Trump has made clear, as you mentioned, that all options are on the table to stop the slaughter. What do you expect the reaction from other speakers to be to those remarks specifically?
I think you'll be listening to Russia and China closely to what they have to say. And I think they're both going to say those are threats, and threats that are unhelpful, unnecessary, and even against the principles of the UN Charter. So I think what we're hearing more and more within the halls of the UN, particularly after the military action by the United States in Venezuela recently, is not only the actions of the United States, violations of international law, as many people say what transpired in Venezuela, but even the threats as well. And I think that there's really a sense with many Security Council members, both privately and publicly, that the U.S. using those threats is clearly not helpful and not in the spirit of the Charter, for sure, if nothing else, by the letter of the Charter. So I think you'll be watching, and I think Russia usually, and China to a lesser degree, often will vocalize those arguments. And I think we'll probably hear that in the next few minutes in this meeting as well.
Gabe, as we wait to hear from more of the members that are in that emergency session, I want to ask you once again about the fact that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had issued a statement just a few days ago in which he said he was shocked by reports of violence and excessive use of force by the authorities in Iran. And I just want to ask you to walk our viewers through what the reaction to that was from different members.
Yeah, there's been some criticism that the Secretary General has not spoken out more publicly. He's issued a statement about the protests. His spokesperson has also issued statements on his behalf as well. He's been asked about it during the daily briefing here at UN headquarters, he being the spokesperson, almost every day this week. So he has been reacting to it, but we haven't heard from the Secretary General himself. And he, being the leader of this organization, can come to the microphone microphones anytime he wants to give a statement about anything he wants. And he has not done that so far. And I think that there has been a little bit of criticism that he has not done that. We heard it from one of the civil society briefers that spoke to the Security Council a few minutes ago, an anti-government activist that was invited by the United States. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, "I want to speak directly to the Secretary General because I know he's watching." She said, "What are you scared of? Why aren't you speaking out more forcefully?" Those were essentially her words. And I think that the Secretary General would, his response would be that I am speaking out about this. And just because I don't come to the microphones or come in front of a video camera or TV camera to speak out about it, doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions on it. I think that's what the Secretary General's message would be. He clearly has said that protesters need to be protected. They have a right to protest. He's clearly called out for any sort of threats or executions of protesters to be halted immediately. And it says all sides really need to come together and show maximum restraint.
Gabe, we also know that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, that he had called for investigations into all killings in Iran. He had called for investigations into the violence against protesters and other violations. Are we expecting to hear more of this kind of calls from other UN officials?
I think so, and the reason is twofold, really. But I think primarily it's the fact that we don't have a lot of information about what is happening in Iran because of the communications blackout. Even the United Nations cannot verify how many people have been killed. They say we're basically going off the numbers that are being reported and what we're hearing from various activists. So I think the fact that there is so little information verifiable is why you're hearing some UN officials saying we really need to have an investigation here to really get to the bottom of these numbers. Now, the United Nations does have 46 international staff in Iran. They have about 440 national staff in Iran. And they're saying that even the United Nations is having a hard time reaching their staff members in Iran sometimes to get information. The UN spokesperson has said, we're pretty much in the same position as anyone else, trying to get information, trying to call our sources, trying to call our staff members in Iran to get information, but sometimes the communications are just totally cut off. And that's not just for the activists, it's not just for the protesters, it's also for the United Nations and their officials trying to get information. So I think that's why you're starting to hear more officials such as Volker Turk and others saying there must be accountability, there must be transparency once all is said and done here about what exactly transpired and what might be transpiring right now.